Welcome to the part 5 of the Book of Mormon Metals Map Geography. Here we'll be talking about how the Book of Mormon Metals Map matches up nicely with some of the major civilizations in South and Central America. So we are here at part 5. We're going to be talking about the Olmec culture, the Mayan culture, and the Isthmo-Colombian cultures, and how they match up with the Nephites, the Mulekites, and the Lamanites. As a reminder from earlier in the presentation, remember that the metals map really only provided us one solution for where the Book of Mormon peoples would be. We had first inheritance occurring down in Ecuador. We had Nephi, the land Nephi in Colombia. And then we have up in Zarahemla and Bountiful in the area of Guatemala and southern part of Mexico. We also have north of that the land Desolation, but the land also of Moron, where the Jaredite kings had their residences. We also learned that this configuration also matches the prophet Joseph Smith in the editorials that he wrote in the Times and Seasons. Specifically, number 1 there, that Zarahemla stood upon Guatemala. Number 2, that the narrow neck of land, which now embraces Central America. And number 3, that Lehi landed a little south of, number 4, the Isthmus of Darien, which we know today as the Isthmus of Panama. So those all match up very nicely with the metals map description. We also noticed a correlation between the invention of Tumbaga, which we think may have been the metal referred to in the Book of Mormon as Ziph, and which was developed in the land of Nephi, according to the Book of Mormon, Ziph anyway, and migrated north with the people as they went north. And this matches very nicely with the cultural history of that area and the history that is available to us about Tumbaga and its migration up to the north. We also noted that it took quite a bit of time for the land of Nephi down there in Colombia to really expand northward and become a threat to the land Zarahemla and the land Bountiful. It wasn't until 72 BC that Captain Moroni establishes a specific boundary between the land Zarahemla and the land Nephi. We also noted that the River Sidon description also fits into this metals map also, in that the Rio Grande de Zacapa in Guatemala, known as the River Copan in Honduras, there in the blue, is very likely or could be the River Sidon, and the location of Zarahemla becomes known to us. And it's in this area, just south of there, that Captain Moroni established this important boundary, political boundary, and military boundary between the land of Zarahemla and the land of Nephi, with the Nephites possessing all the land northward, yea, even all the land northward of the land Bountiful, according to their pleasure. So they maintained this border so that the Lamanites could not come up and go further north, which was a land that they sought to preserve for their own use. Speaking of the land further north, we need to talk a little bit about that other narrow neck of land and the narrow pass which led by the sea into the land northward. And this occurs here in this area of Central America. And so we see the narrow pass through this area right here from the coastal plain, taking us then up into the north where Desolation would have been. Now there are some descriptions of this that can be confusing. 2 of them very specifically talk about specific boundaries and the time it would take for a Nephite to travel on that boundary. Notice this first one, that it was a day and a half's journey on the line Bountiful and the land Desolation from the east to the west sea. notice that this does not say from the East Sea to the West Sea, which is a common interpretation. It just says that from the east of this border between Bountiful and Desolation, it was a day and a half's journey to the West Sea. Also, there is a defensive line that is referred to as being 1 day's journey for a Nephite. And it goes from the West Sea even unto the east. But again, it doesn't say to the East Sea. It just says that it is a day's journey for a Nephite on the line which they had fortified, which makes sense when you look at the width of the coastal plain. This would match very closely to a 1 day's journey on that defensive line, preventing the Lamanites from coming up that coastal plain, going through the narrow pass into the land northward. A very strategic position that the Nephites maintained very strict control over. And this, you'll see how this comes to play also when we talk about Mormon's description of the events that occurred in his day and the lands northward from this narrow pass. So with these boundaries, we have an interesting correlation. The metals map then matches the Jaredites with the Olmecs, the Mulekites and the Nephites with the Maya, and the Lamanites with the Isthmo-Colombian culture. We have here the border established between Zarahemla and the land Nephi, which in the metals map geography corresponds very nicely with the boundary between the Maya and the Isthmo-Colombian culture. We have the narrow neck of land where to the north, which goes into the land northward, which also separates the land Bountiful from the land Desolation, described that way by the Mulekites when they came into it because of the great destruction of the Jaredite nation, or as we reference here, the Olmec culture. When we look at the histories of these people, both from the Book of Mormon, presented to you in black, and from secular history, presented for you in red, we realize that the Jaredite history matches very nicely with the Olmecs, because it is described of the Olmecs in conventional American history that around 400 to 350 BC, the Olmec civilization went through a massive depopulation. And the sparse population in the eastern area of their habitation, in the area of southern Mexico referred to as Veracruz, lasted all the way into the 19th century as very sparsely populated. The Book of Mormon tells us that before 300 BC, which fits in there in those date range, that the Jaredites had been destroyed in a civil war. Then when we look at the Mulekite history, again we match that with the Maya and the Mayan period known as the Middle Pre-Classic period, from 600 BC up to 350 BC. We learn that in the Book of Mormon that's the time when the Mulekites, remember, left Jerusalem. It was about the same time as Lehi. We don't know how long it took them to actually come into this area where the Jaredites had been. We don't have dates from the Book of Mormon. But we know that sometime before 300 BC, the Mulekites had left Jerusalem and landed in America and come into this area. In Alma chapter 22, it talks about what they discovered. The desolation, as they discovered the people discovered by the people of Zarahemla at their landing. So they came up south into Bountiful. Now we know also that by the time that King Mosiah came up from the south, from the land Nephi, and found these people and joined with them, that by that time, which was around 280 BC, these people, the Mulekites, had lost their central language and their religion. So now we move into that period, which is referred to in history as the late pre-classic period, from 350 BC to 250 AD. We learn that the Maya, around 300 BC, get a hieroglyphic written language. Well, that matches up very nicely with Mosiah coming up from the south into this area, and he unites with the Mulekites, and he is made king over them, and he brings with him language, writing, and religion in the scriptures. Also, the Jaredite records are translated by Mosiah. And then, as we continue forward in this timeline in 72 BC, we have again Captain Moroni establishing this border between the Nephites and the Mulekites in Zarahemla and Bountiful, and the Lamanites, who are now expanding from the south and coming up and posing a threat, such that Captain Moroni has to establish a military and political border. This matches up very nicely with this presentation that shows the Mayan region and the Isthmo-Colombian cultural area to the south, and where the boundary between those two occurs and where they kind of merge together. You'll notice that that merging occurs right in the area of Guatemala and Honduras. This arrangement, of course, matches very nicely with Captain Moroni's border. Notice also here is a fairly recent discovery of the La Mercedes stone road in Costa Rica. This is a stone road that goes out of Las Mercedes to the north and to the south. The road going northward is called the Iroquois Causeway, and the one going out to the south, the Pocara Causeway. This suggests that there was communication by road through this area. And of course we know from the Book of Mormon that that did become established and was quite robust, especially during the time of peace, not too long before the Savior came, or the Savior was born, where there was extensive trade between the south and the Nephites and the Mulekites in the north. Also, it helps to explain how the Tumbaga could have migrated to the north because of this communication system of roads or highways or whatever that were eventually established.